So as James mentioned, and as the title suggests, I want to, I suppose, talk about regional, if not territorial, competitiveness in this smart economy era that we're all living in at the moment. I'm aware that it's after lunch, and I hope, in terms of the presentation, to keep it relatively engageable with. I made some rather simplistic assumptions, but I'm willing to discuss that either straight after the session or in the panel session. But what I want to do is hopefully kind of get across, I think what's, in essence, a pretty simplistic idea, and that is that regional competitiveness is something that is, of course, quite highly involved. Competitiveness itself is a rather loaded term. And our ability to gauge it is something that we need to constantly look at again and again. And especially as economies evolve, and the economy, not just in the west of Ireland, but Ireland, Western Europe more generally, evolves at an increasing pace, we have to refocus our attention on what it is we're describing competitiveness as. So if I start off with just a pretty simplistic definition of competitiveness, as a comparative concept, the ability and performance of a firm, subsector or country to sell and supply goods or services in a given market. I kind of already referred to it. It is something that is dynamic, it is in constant flux. To be competitive today, obviously does not mean that you will be competitive tomorrow. Gerhard mentioned this in relation to Baden-Württemberg, but it's something that we're also quite aware of here in Ireland, especially over the last number of years. Since the setting up of the National Competitiveness Council in Ireland in the 1990s, it's something that headlines have constantly referred to Ireland's competitiveness vis-a-vis other countries. In times of economic good, we were losing competitiveness even though we were becoming a richer country. In times of economic ill, we seem to be regaining some competitiveness in terms of labour costs, in terms of land costs. But we're still living through a time of economic ill. So it is something of a contested notion that I'd like to unpack in this presentation today. First of all, competitiveness in terms of firm competitiveness, and forgive me here for using generic kind of graphics, but competitiveness in terms of firm competitiveness is pretty easy, I suppose, to grasp in the sense that firms are competitive based on a number of physical attributes to that firm, that is, its amount of physical assets, its labour force, and there's a general assumption that the more of those you have, the more competitive your firm becomes. There is, of course, the realisation that, the more rare the resources of the firm, the better that firm is able to compete in terms of once it has. The rarer the resources that it has, the more competitive that firm is. And so, build on that, I just wanted to kind of divide that issue into two, and that is looking at competitiveness in terms of what's replicable and what's non-replicable. So the rare elements in terms of resources are the ones that are on the right-hand side here. These are the tacit knowledge, the social relations, the reputation, the brand. And the replicable are the more kind of physical, traditional assets of the firm that we've known. And I think it's pretty obvious where I'd be going with this, is that a more competitive firm, of course, has more it's better described by the words on the right-hand column than it is on the left-hand column. And we're replete with examples of this in terms of all major industries and all major sectors. Miller and Shancy in a 1996 study had something in terms of how they compared Hollywood in the 1930s and looked at the studios and the competitiveness of studios. And they took Clark Gable as one of the stars at the time, and they considered him a physical asset for Warner Brothers firms. The Warner Brothers firm. Clark Gable was in Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer. And they compared this to Warner Brothers, who in competition with Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer hired Tyrone Power, a physically a good-looking man, a fine actor, and brought him on board in an effort to compete with the other studio. Of course, but they didn't realise that so much more went with Clark Gable than just the physical stardom or the physical man himself. These were these softer attributes, the kind of more tacit knowledge in terms of the script writers, in terms of the producers that were located in the studio, in terms of the reputation that the star he himself actually had, and in terms of the support structures. And we see this today, and we see it in terms of virtually all goods in the kind of higher end of the market. The example, of course, being Apple Computers, a company that has actually dropped the word computer from its firm name because it's become more interested in its mobile devices, in its digital hub, in creating an experiential devices like the iPhone and the iPod. And these are basically just an example of very physical things that firms can compete on to products that are ostensibly the same, but the non-physical attributes in terms of the support systems that go with those products really differentiating and really showing which of the two are the most competitive. So the tangibility of a firm in terms of its resources, in terms of its assets, is only the starting point in terms of judging competitiveness. It's the non-tangibility where we're really beginning to decide on those firms that are competing better than others. And for territories, like regions, like countries, the same can be said again. There is a resource-based view of a region where you just look at its physical attributes in terms of its stocks of assets, and you look at its topography, its stratigraphy, and you can basically decipher to some extent how competitive, how rich, how well endowed certain regions are. But then, of course, as a point I made with regards to firms, the same thing is applicable to territorial entities. So you have very tangible aspects of regions, and you have the less tangible aspects of regions. And I draw the correlation between territories and firms here, and make it obvious in the sense that regions compete on these factors, on these facets, on the right-hand side column. Is that lots of regions out there have their own physical stocks, physical attributes. They go out there and they replicate certain things like labour laws, like industry standards, something that we've done in Ireland to a relative degree of success in terms of its development over the last 50 years. We've created an education system with ISO classifications that have made us very attractive for international foreign investment. We've also put in place innovation policies and smart economy policies that have had their own varying degrees of impact. The point that I'm making here is that these things can be put in place in other regions just as easily as it has been done here in Ireland and in the West. What is non-replicable are these softer assets. Here in BMW's innovation audit does refer to the non-tangible, which I suppose what I'm getting at here. And it's something that I, in terms of my studies, I begin to recognizing as becoming more and more important. And these things are, from a researcher's perspective, are somewhat unsatisfactory because they're very difficult to define, to grasp. But the social environment, the cultural environment, the business environment, the support systems, reputation, history, and branding. something similar, to the ephemeral nature of having an iPod versus any other generic MP3 player. There is the kind of experiential element to it. There's something about being in Silicon Valley, if you're a tech entrepreneur, that something in the air, as Alfred Marshall coined a phrase back in 1914, that is important and is a key attribute in terms of helping regions compete. So taking this and applying it to our region here in terms of the BMW region, a couple of facts that I don't really need to go into because they've already been discussed this morning. Looking at it taking a more kind of, I suppose, global and European viewpoint is to look at it in terms of the context of Europe and the fifth report on economic, social and territorial cohesion. A very generalist conclusion on that is that the BMW's performance has been average. Average in the sense of total expenditure on R&D, 98,260. Patent applications, also 98. In brackets there, should be higher than the southern and eastern. A regional innovation performance index that comes out as average, and that's measured as low, medium, low, average, medium, high, and high. Labour productivity and broadband, something that we've already referred to this morning. Population with tertiary education is 76 out of 260, doing better. Employment in high-tech sectors is 42nd. Another facet another factor that points itself out to me, and I'll discuss that a bit later. But a regional competitive ranking then that comes 130th out of 260. So hopefully I've kind of got you to the point of I've made myself clear in terms of really questioning what it is we mean by regional competitiveness there. Regional competitiveness in terms of that ranking is simply the summation of a number of 40 or so metrics that the report goes into. But what my question is whether or not it's more than the sum of that. When we're talking about regional competitiveness, are we ever really going to get an answer in terms of a ranking or in terms of an index according to the metrics that we're currently using? And I don't know if we are. I go back to Storper's definition of territorial competitiveness as the ability of an economy to attract and maintain firms with stable or rising market shares in an activity while maintaining standards of living for those who participate in it. And taking that definition and coming up myself with what I think is something of a more real metric, I want to look at the BMW region vis-a-vis the nation of Ireland. Past 18 months, of course, have been one replete with good news and bad news, with friends from the IMF coming to visit us every quarter, and lots of other news in terms of the financial economy and its impacts on the real economy. But I take a relatively simple measure here, which is looking at the number of job restructuring, essentially using the European Restructuring Monitor, which is a very good database run by the European Commission, and looking at the numbers of jobs gained and lost over those 18 months. Significant figure there. Again, the figure at the bottom are jobs lost, or somewhere along the lines of 7,000. Jobs gained are somewhere along the lines of 12,000. Looking at that from a regional perspective, we're seeing that relatively we're gaining more jobs than we're losing, and we have done over the last 18 months compared to the nation of Ireland. Caveat there, regards. What I wanted to do then is group those announcements by jobs according to value. And again, I'm being pretty simplistic here with the metrics for the purposes of this presentation. I've ranked jobs along a hierarchy in terms of value added, and that from a low value added to a high value added. And I have 5 different categories, from low value manufacturing, low value services, high value manufacturing, high value services, to the high end R&D with supranational agreements. And I have a couple of examples of that, just to get on through that. And I hope it hasn't become very clear, but in terms of the types of jobs being lost, there's going to be no surprise there that it is the lower value ones that we have lost, both nationally and within the region. You'll see from a national perspective, we're talking about a quarter of the jobs lost are in basic assembly manufacturing, with a significant, almost 2/3 of the jobs lost being in low value services. A lot of these are to do with banking and retail, and high value manufacturing making up the rest. For the region, then, the BMW region, over half the jobs we've lost have been in low value manufacturing, with a quarter of them lost in high value manufacturing, and that came down to a couple of medical device firms pulling out of the region, mostly Athlone and Mayo over the last 18 months. Conversely, you look at the jobs that we've gained, and it is more or less the flip side of that. We are gaining jobs in the high value added sectors, as I've defined them, and looking at the BMW region compared to the nation, we are doing relatively the same, if not better, in terms of getting the percentage of jobs that we're getting being even higher value added than the percentage of jobs that the nation is getting as a whole. So hopefully this picture is somewhat clear in that. Interestingly, the ownerships of the jobs lost, I just divided it up by those that were indigenous firms and those that were multinational firms. And I think this kind of is an interesting enough metric, because there is, and it has already been alluded to today, this perceived notion that foreign-owned companies are more likely than indigenous companies to either close or to up and to leave. I'm not seeing that particularly obvious from the last 18 months, and from further research that myself and Seamus have done, it's not particularly obvious at all. And when it comes to jobs gained, you'll see that on a national level, 3/4 of the jobs gained in terms of those 12,000 odd jobs were brought in by foreign direct investment. A caveat here as well in terms of this data is that I'm not picking up the startups. I'm not, because this European restructuring monitor only concentrates on job announcements or firm closures that are 50 employees and greater. So I just think that. In terms of the BMW region then, in regards to the ownership of jobs gained, you'll see that we relatively have more of an influence from the indigenous sector. So, looking at competitiveness again as the ability of an economy to attract and maintain firms with stable or rising market shares, I just want to take you to 2 quick slides here. And this kind of relates to further work, other work that I've done on Galway City itself. This kind of relates to a planned paper myself and Kevin Layden of CIS were working on, looking at what it is that attracts, that makes attractive places. So we start off with this left-hand sphere as your attractive place. Attractive places attract people and attract firms. And from the new smart economy that we're living in, we are beginning to recognize that more and more people are choosing a place over a job. That is, migration is more related to the attractiveness of the place that people want to live in, as opposed to a job bringing them to that place. And I'm conscious that I might be running out of time here, but let's just look at Galway then over the last 18 or so months. There's a quality of life issue here in Galway and in the west of Ireland, and other work that I've carried out with the Western Development Commission has gone to great lengths to point this out, that Galway and the west of Ireland has become an attractive place to people. Migration statistics also bear that out in terms of attracting highly educated European and foreign graduates. This is an exciting place to do, a perception that it is an exciting place to be, that it is culturally thick in the right way to be thick, that it has built up a reputation that is of course based on its history. It has the right mix of infrastructure and international experience. One multinational company had its CEO ask of its decision to locate in Galway, how can you hope to employ 500 people in a city only the size of 70,000 people? The answer to which, well, it's attractive to over 1 million people within the island of Ireland, and it's attractive to multiple more in regards to the European context. So, coming back then to competitiveness. As the economy is constantly evolving, it's obvious that there's a move away. There's a move away in terms of what it is that firms are making, money out of, and move away from the tangible and the physical to the less tangible and the experiential. Again, I'll set the example of that. So, in this kind of world, applying the old metrics that we have, like that regional competitive index, can no longer apply. I mean, such as the changing nature of the economy, you need a changing, you need the ability to, or you need to have metrics that keep up to that, keep up with that change. And this is as true for regions as it is for firms. I mean, the imperative is for firms because the imperative is for firms to survive, but it similarly impacts on regions, and regions need to be aware of that. So quite simply, replicable policies attract replicable firms. And when we follow that line, we begin to see that competition then is really that zero-sum game thing, that if you don't get it, somebody else will. For the likes of Ireland, for the likes of the BMW region, to be competing in that arena is, of course, it makes very little sense, because that's a game that we're never going to win. We are competing globally in that sense, and there will always be someplace cheaper, and there will always be someplace where the labour laws will be more attractive for firms to go and invest in. The BMW region needs to focus then on what it can offer that is unique, boosting systems of support, innovation, and cultivating and promoting its rich environment will act as a key attraction for business growth and development. Arguably, regional innovation systems and all systems of support that promote not just economic development, but social and cultural development across the region will make it that attractive place to be, will make it the place that people will want to invest in, both foreign people and indigenous as well. So, thank you.